Hello, happy day again, and welcome back to lesson 3. So we're used to doing this in class. So today I'm inviting you just to pause the screen in a minute and in silence and on your own, complete these warm-up activities just to review what we learned yesterday. So the first 3 are to complete the definition. Inexplicable means something that, impregnated means, and hoax means. So in a minute, you're just going to try and complete that definition, ideally without looking at your notes from yesterday, but if you get really stuck, of course you can. And then I want you to copy and complete these sentences using what you think would be the best word to complete those sentences. The ghostly piano music was a mystery because it was caused by mice. After the bonfire, the smell of smoke, his clothes. They'd only meant it as they'd never imagined it would end this way. So you're going to pause the screen now and complete your daily review. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through the answers. Inexplicable means something that cannot be explained, has no logical reason, cannot be accounted for. Impregnated means, brilliant, yep, you got it, something that is soaked or infused or saturated in something else. And hoax means a humorous or mean deception and lie. Brilliant. So if you got those 3 right, wonderful. Give yourself a tick. Now, this is just to check out that we can use them in the sentences. So which one will we pick to complete sentence 1? Yes, absolutely. The first one then is going to be inexplicable. The ghostly piano music was an inexplicable mystery because it was caused by mice. Brilliant. Give yourself a mark. What did you choose for number 2? Yes, absolutely. After the bonfire, the smell of smoke impregnated his clothes. Brilliant. So the idea that bonfire smoke can just really saturate and soak into your clothes. It's really hard to get that smell out. Brilliant. And last but not least, okay, we know it's going to be hoax, but I like this one. It's like the setup for a story. I want to know what they did. How did this lie, this joke go wrong? They'd only meant it as a hoax. They never imagined it would end this way. Brilliant. So that review is just reminding us then of some of that key vocabulary that we've introduced. Lovely. Okay, so today though, we're moving on and we're going to be looking at our lesson number 3. So we're still mastering our reading skills. And today we're not simply reading, we're exercising our brain muscles. Okay, so you can use this for your just to kind of orientate yourself, getting your pen, book ready to go, but hopefully you would have used it for our review task anyway. So we are on lesson 3 of this week's learning, and we're going to be exercising those brain muscles today in a new way. Again, this is really here as a point that if you want to pause and remind yourselves of how we're using images across the lessons, you can, but I'm not going to linger here too long. It's just a point of reference for us, some of the ways we're asking you to read and respond during this time. This is what I want us to pause and write down. Okay, so this is our key question for today. We can use this as our title. So how can I add new information to what I know already? And this is why we're going to be exercising brain muscle. Often our brain's really good at storing small bits of information, particularly in our short-term memory. But I'm going to ask that we add to the information from our first text, from Grant Andrew Green's interview, some new information. So we're going to be bringing 2 lots of information together today. And that is a different set of reading skills, okay? It's going to introduce us to some extra reading skills. So pause and just write down our question for today. How can I add new information to what I know already? Okay, brilliant. So what do we know already? We know our new vocabulary. We also know that there's some skills we've been practicing that we've been thinking in that lesson 1 about visualizing, seeing a picture in your mind. We've practiced across 2 lessons now, the ability to shorten and select ideas. We've practiced being able to ask questions as we read and to try and get a clear idea of what we're reading. Now, those are brilliant when you're dealing with one text. But today we're going to add into our knowledge bank some other words when we begin to look at 2 texts. Okay, so when we want to add to what we already know, we're going to use 3 other key words. So these are those words. In a minute, I'm going to get you to pause and to write them down. What we're going to practice today is the 3 C's to help us add to what we know. We're going to think about categorizing, asking the key question, what is? So how do we categorize what we read? How do we group things together? We're going to look at the skill of comparison, picking out similarities. So how is the text we read yesterday like a text we're going to read today? Well, how are they similar? Okay, and we're also going to think about differences. So sometimes when you're building information onto what you already know, you do it by comparing and contrasting. So what ways or in what ways is X different to Y? So those are the three C's. So I'm going to repeat them because they're really important to us. Can we categorize our information? Helps us to group information together. And we create categories by thinking about things that are similar. How is X like Y? And how things are different. Well, in what ways is X different to Y? So when we press pause on this slide, I want you to write down this, the keywords categorize, compare, and contrast. And to help us do this and put these ideas into practice today, we're going to introduce a second text to help us practice these new reading skills. Okay, so we're just going to pause there and give you a chance to write down our three C's: categorize, compare, and contrast. Off you go. Okay, lovely people. So to practice the skill of categorizing, that skill of asking, well, what is the same, what's different, we have to start by reading this text for the first time. And as you can see on the screen, we're starting to overlap the reading strategy. So we've got some questions here. What type of text is this? What had the writer been researching? And what words link to the idea of ghosts? Okay, so I'm going to read this information to you, and I just want you to pause. Now, you can either write down your personal response when we pause in your own books. You can just hold the information in your head, but I would love you to think about these three questions. So it says here, 19th century literary non-fiction, an extract from a book called From Matter to Spirit, in which the writer, Sophia Elizabeth de Morgan, published the results of her research into people who could communicate with the spirit world. Okay, so when I say stop, I want you to tell me what type of text this is. The information is on the screen. What had the writer been researching? And what words link to the idea of ghosts? Okay, so using those questions and bringing it together with the skill of categorizing, here are our answers then. I hope you got them. So it tells us that this is a non-fiction, an extract from a book. Okay, so yesterday we weren't looking at a book, we were looking at an interview in a newspaper. So a little bit of difference emerging. Okay, and it's a book called From Matter to Spirit. Now it says over here, what had the writer been researching? So hopefully you found that. She'd been researching people who could communicate with the spirit world. And I do love her name, Sophia Elizabeth de Morgan. Now, the other thing that we also can see, it says what words link to the idea of ghosts. So yesterday we were looking at our Andrew Green Ghost Hunter. Okay, now here it's using the word spirit, the spirit world, from matter to spirit. Now, that might be based on whether you knew that the word spirit could refer to ghosts, or that could be new information that you've learned today. But it's definitely, we've got a book, an extract from a book, we're communicating with the spirit world and research into it, and we're linking to the world of ghosts. Okay, so categorizing means, can we in any way say that this source B is already setting itself up to link to source A? Can we put them in the same category? So if we look at text type, this one says it's an extract from a book. We know from yesterday that source A wasn't an extract from a book. It was, in fact, a newspaper article, because it made it really clear at the beginning it was an interview between Andrew Green and the journalist. So in terms of categorizing based on type of text, sadly, no, we can't put them together. Now, in this one, our researcher, our writer, Sophia Elizabeth de Morgan, has been researching people who could communicate with the spirit world. Does that create a shared category and overlap with source A? Well, we could suggest that actually, here we've got one writer looking into people who could communicate with the spirit world. And similarly, so in the same way, source A is a journalist looking into researching a particular person who had a connection with ghosts. So actually, although they're two different text types, one's an extract from a book, one's a newspaper article. And actually, just to zoom in on something here that we've missed nearly, that this 19th century book, so a Victorian book, and yesterday's was a modern article, so they're not in the same category of text, but they do seem to be similar in terms of talking about ghosts and a link to the world of ghosts and that interest. So sometimes when we start to categorize things, we can look for things that are the same, we can compare and look for similarities, or we can use contrast, things that are different, to break them apart. And that's what we're going to look at doing today. So for the next bit, I'm just going to read through Source B with you. We've done a similar thing before where I'm just going to read to you. Now, there are going to be some prompts on the screen, but I don't want you to worry about those. They're for an activity in the minute. So I just want you to trust me as I read to you this Source B. Okay, so be ready to follow in your text. So this is the writer Sophia Morgan. I now offer a trustworthy account which has come to my own knowledge of an appearance to someone present at the time of death. Many years ago, Mrs. D, a person in humble life but of tried and proved truthfulness and rather matter of fact, said to me in a conversation about ghosts and ghost seeing, I never saw a ghost, but I have seen a spirit rise. So this book extract begins with our writer saying that they're offering a trustworthy account. They really want us to believe that what they're about to tell us is true. It's trustworthy. And to help build that idea, they give us a description of this character, this person, Mrs. D, to help us visualize her as a trustworthy person. It says that Mrs. D is in humble life. Now, a humble person is somebody who puts himself down rather than builds himself up. Somebody who sees himself at the bottom rather than at the top of things. So this humble person, we're meant to trust her because she is humble. Okay, and it says that this person, Mrs. D, that we can begin to visualize as a humble person, is of tried and proved truthfulness. So in other words, she's proven herself to be a truth teller, somebody we can trust. And the fact that she speaks rather matter-of-factly, as if this was just another fact about her experience, brings up in conversation that she has seen a spirit rise. So our writer works really hard at the beginning of this text to help us believe that Mrs. D is trustworthy. If you tell me what you saw, I said, I will write it as you speak and will beg you to sign your name. This she did, and the present account is copied from her own words, as I wrote them and she put her signature. So now this is Mrs. D telling us what happened to her. When I was 16 years old, I was nursing a child of 7 who'd been ill since his birth with disease of the head. He'd been for some days expected to die, but it was quite sensible. About noon, I left him in a little back parlour on the ground floor. His mother and a friend were with him. I was returning from the kitchen to the child and had just reached the top of the staircase when I saw him coming from the door of the room, the form of a little child. It did not step on the ground, but immediately went up over the staircase and disappeared from me. The bed on which the sick child had been lying was close to the door of the room, and that door was not more than about a foot from the top of the staircase which I came up. As I entered the room, his mother said, he has just gone. The figure that I saw was a little child, fair and fresh looking and perfectly healthy. It looked fatter and younger than the little sick boy and had a very animated, happy expression. It was like a living child, only so light. So we had the first account of what the woman had seen as a young child, and now the book takes us into a second account. Compare the above account of a vision by a girl of 16 with the following narration, the following story of an imperfect vision of the same kind, which occurred later in life to the same person. More than 20 years after that, I was sitting up with a mother of a child who'd been ill 3 or 4 days with fits. Was no more than 2 years old. The mother had one arm under the child's head. I was on the other side of the bed, lying by the side of the baby, and the fire was burning brightly on the same side of the room as that on which the mother sat. Suddenly I saw the fire darkened by something that seemed to flutter or move backwards and forwards before it. I noticed this to the mother who was between the bed and the fire, but she did not see it and declared that the fire was bright. The fits left the child about 6 o'clock and it lay perfectly still. It ceased to breathe about 10:30. I saw the darkening of the fire for an hour before the child died, and the instant it expired, the fire was distinctly visible. The seer of the above was an uneducated woman who could not account for the variation in her two visions, and who had certainly never heard of the different degrees of opening of spirit sight. To me, therefore, the account of the second vision confirmed the truth of the first. Had she invented both stories, she would most likely have made the second instance appear the most striking and wonderful. But she was not given to invention. I have known this woman for many years, and her character for truthfulness is quite above suspicion. So we've now read Source B. We're just going to pause there and then move into some activities to help us understand it